You may remember at this year's State of the Union address, if you watched, that Joe Biden said he would save Americans $20 billion annually by cutting junk fees at the bank. It only amounts to $153 per household each year. A slap in the face to American households when they have to pay $12,061 more in yearly inflation costs than when he took office. An expensive undertaking, to say the least. Those staggering numbers aside, Biden's mission might be better received if it were a legitimate attempt to help Americans deal with rising costs. Instead, Biden's recent proposal is the latest in a broader campaign of misdirected policies. That's just the way it is. The highest inflation we've had in years, raising taxes on the wealthy and ultimately raising them for small businesses as well, and more student debt being forgiven. $550 billion now. And it's not forgiving debt. It's sending you the bill. Here with me to discuss all of these misdirected policies is the Executive Vice President, the National Taxpayers Union, Brandon Arnold. Brandon, good to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Well, here we are. I mean, pick a policy there. I mean, spin the dial there and tell me which one you like. Spin the wheel. Because, look, they're all bad. Let's start with student loans. What are we, $550 billion? The Supreme Court says you can't do it. Joe Biden, the Democrat, says, we don't care. We need to buy votes, and darn it, we're going to do it with your taxpayer money. I mean, how it's illegal. Am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. It's unconstitutional, even worse than being illegal. It's unconstitutional. Right. We have already forgiven, this administration has already forgiven about $150 billion in student debt, despite, as you said, the Supreme Court last year saying that this administration did not have the authority under the Constitution, the law of the land, to do so. Now they just announced earlier this week an even bigger plan that could be as much as $750 billion. If you think
so,
that's
bigger
a lot of
than
money,
even I said. Bigger than I said. So
yes.
Would you do me a favor, Brandon? Describe to me what you think a constitutional crisis would be. Wouldn't that be when the Supreme Court says you can't do this, and the people in charge say, yeah, we don't care. We're going to do it anyway. I mean, the Supreme Court doesn't have an army. They can't go enforce this. But in general terms, when the Supreme Court speaks, American citizens listen at every level, from the top all the way down. Yet here we are.
Yeah, their argument is that they're revising the plan, that they're putting out a more targeted plan that will pass constitutional muster. I think, to use Joe Biden's terminology, I think that's a bunch of malarkey. They are still trying to appropriate funds without the assent of Congress. And therefore, I think this will get struck down. But what happens in the meantime between the announcement of the plan, the implementation of the plan, they're already moving through the regulatory process, I should say, and the attempt to give people these handouts from the government, essentially, these education subsidies that they intend to deliver before November, conveniently enough. This is nothing more, as you noted, than a naked attempt to try to buy votes. It is really an abuse of power.
The emperor's naked, all right. Let's talk about this. Wealth tax, death tax, tax on the wealthy, whatever that means, because it gets lower all the time. Brandon, can you describe for me and for everybody listening and watching today, what is your fair share? What is your fair share as described by the Democrats?
Yeah, I think that's a moving target. I don't think they'll ever answer that question because, as we've seen, the tax code has become more and more progressive over the years, despite some of the top rate cuts that have taken place under JFK, Reagan, and Trump. We've seen the rich paying a larger percentage of the overall tax burden. As it stands now, the top 5% of American taxpayers pay about 2/3 of total income taxes. So we have the rich paying the most. The bottom 50%, half of taxpayers, pay less than 3% of the overall tax burden. We've continued to push more and more of the tax burden onto wealthier Americans, and yet it's never enough for the progressives. They want, as you said, to do a wealth tax. They want to raise corporate taxes. They want to raise taxes on the wealthier segment of our economy. It is never going to be enough no matter what we do. So I don't know how to answer your question other than to say they want more.
I think the fair share is all of it. All of it. Take all of your money away from you and give it to somebody over here. It's all of it. Look, we brought in $4.5 trillion in revenue on Monday of this week. It's not enough. They want to spend $7.3 trillion. Brandon, it is completely out of control. Sir, thank you for being here.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Look, for 10 years now, Patriot Mobile has been America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. And when I say only, trust me, there are no more. They are the only one. They've been great supporters of this program and this network, which is why I'm proud to be working with them. Patriot Mobile offers dependable nationwide coverage, giving you the ability to access all three major networks, which means you get the same coverage you've been accustomed to without funding the left. When you switch to Patriot Mobile, you're sending a message that you support free speech. What a blessing. Religious freedom, important. The sanctity of life, the Second Amendment, our military, of course, and first responders and heroes. Their 100% U.S.-based customer service team makes switching easy, which means you get to keep your number, keep your phone, upgrade if you'd like. Their team will help you find the best plan for your needs. They did it for me. They did it for Ivy, my wife. Just go to patriotmobile.com/RAV or call 972-PATRIOT. Get free activation when you use the offer code RAV, R-A-V. Join me. Make the switch today. That's patriotmobile.com/RAV or call 972-PATRIOT. Listen, I've been in Florida recently, worked great. In Ohio recently, worked great. Michigan, North Carolina, and California worked great in all those places. It's going to work great for you, too. Coming up after the break, it's time to respond to your emails where you are free to say what's on your mind. And boy, do they do it this week right here on AVL.